Hello and blessings, beautiful souls. Saravá Axé to you. How are you today? It's so nice to be looking into your beautiful smiling faces. So today I am heading into town because I'm helping out some friends get to the airport, and so I'm just going to do a solo trip into town, well, with them, and then do a solo trip back. But I've got a few little errands to run on the way, and let's see what kind of mischief I can get up to today and what kind of topic will emerge from today's activities. So, yay! Okay, so this Hobart trip was pretty whirlwind. I stopped, I ate, I grabbed the absolute essentials, and I'm back in the car, so I wasn't even in town for longer than 40 minutes. But as I sat there to have my morning tea by myself, I started to search social media, and today's topic then emerged. And what I want to talk about respectfully and kindly is the new generation of witchcraft versus the old generation of witchcraft, and how there is now something that I now call an age gap between modern witchcraft and the older fashioned craft. So I think we've all seen the conversations pertaining to modern witchcraft, consumerism, aesthetic, etc. doing the rounds on social media, and many people contributing to the conversation, and sometimes these conversations can get truly heated because everyone's trying to express an authentic opinion, and no matter what it is that you say on the subject or how it is that you say it, you're absolutely going to end up inadvertently offending somebody else. And there is something really interesting that's happening there in that exchange. And the other day, as in yesterday, when I was talking to Mary Kate Greer and Rachel Pollack, Mary Kate Greer said something to me that caused a light bulb to go off. And when I started to think about it today over my morning tea, I found that the issues that I can personally see taking place are a result of the changing landscape of witchcraft, the evolution that witchcraft has gone through from the late 90s to now. When I speak to the practitioner of witchcraft that is more of my generation, it is such a tasty conversation that can be had, particularly when it surrounds the 90s witch craze. Because the 90s, for my generation, was where witchcraft blew up in the public eye. More books on witchcraft, or books full stop on witchcraft, could now be seen on bookshelves other than that of new age stores. More specialty witchcraft stores were opening. Hollywood and TV caught wind of the popularity of witchcraft, and you saw such shows as The Craft, Practical Magic, Buffy, Charmed, and so forth. And in the 90s, everything was so intense when it came to witchcraft, and there were magazines about witchcraft. There were specialty stores that were so niche, and there was just such an open and welcoming vibe in the 90s, and I don't recognize those points of contention that I see now in 90s witchcraft, because everything was so open and exciting and new. And that's probably because I was young and I didn't really know the older generation of witchcraft, especially not from the neo-pagan perspective. But when I look back at that time, I remember having some pretty heated conversations with my own mother pertaining to my religious practices or my spiritual practices or my witchcraft practices, and she really did look down at her nose on my practice, and I had to find a way to communicate what I was doing. And when I couldn't convince her that it was good for me, that it made me feel good, that it made me feel powerful and validated and fulfilled, when I couldn't managed to communicate that to her, I just didn't want to talk about it anymore because I did not want the judgment. And what I see going on now is that we have these issues that are cropping up on social media pertaining to all the subjects that I've previously entailed. And what that looks like to me is a generational gap within the practice of witchcraft and a lack of understanding that is so natural when we look at the changing landscape and the changes of era within witchcraft. For every generation of witchcraft, there is an age gap. Every single one. There is an age gap between me and my mother. There was an age gap between me and my grandmother. There is an age gap between me and modern traditions now. There'll be an age gap between me and my children's traditions when they grow older. And age gaps within the context of witchcraft are just a natural evolution of the practice. And it is easy to feel disconnected and out of place. It is easy to feel like you no longer have a voice within the new landscape of witchcraft because it's no longer friendly to express an opinion on the subject of witchcraft, particularly for those in an older generation of practice, because there is no common language. For those who cut their teeth on 90s witchcraft, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because anyone that came to the craft after the 90s, when we were in the early 2000s, so beyond like 2010, let's say, if you came to the craft after 2010, you already belonged to the new generation of witchcraft, and the shift started to truly take place around 2005. At least that's how I witnessed it. That's my version of the truth. And what I see today, those who picked up the craft during that time after that 90s and early 2000s craft, what I see now is something that is totally different, totally unique. It's interesting, it's baffling, it's triggering. But isn't that the case with music? Isn't that the case with art? Isn't that the case with politics? Whenever a new generation steps in to a place of power, there is always going to be a sense of inner conflict and outer conflict. I would like to see the landscape of witchcraft change in a manner that respects the older generation and that respects the newer generation, because both have a voice that is worthy of being heard. New isn't better. Old isn't better. The older traditions aren't better than the newer traditions. There are pros and cons to both traditions. No one single era of witchcraft had it sorted. There were issues no matter which era of witchcraft you belonged to. The point is that once you can acknowledge that there is a very natural generation gap occurring, and that social media is at this moment sort of flittering around topics that really do echo that gap in generation, once you can really acknowledge that, then I think you can become much more at peace and understand that there is a really natural dynamic taking place or occurring behind the scenes of these types of conversations, and that's really positive to be able to identify the issue. At least that's the issue that I've personally identified. There may be others that I am yet to see, but what I see now for myself and for others through conversations that I'm having with those of my own personal generation and conversations that I have with those of a modern tradition, with the books that I'm reading and the literature that I'm viewing and the blogs and the social media posts, like I see something taking place. And it occurred to me that something is that the landscape of witchcraft has changed before my very eyes, and I don't 100% understand what it is now, the new generation of witchcraft, and I'm very comfortable with my old-fashioned witchcraft. It works for me, and so of course there is going to be a generation gap, but that doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. In fact, it's just a natural thing, and when we can honor that individually and collectively, then I think we can be in a really good place. So that's it from me today, beautiful souls. I am wishing you so much love, luck, peace, and joy. Please contribute to this conversation if you have something to add. And as per usual, I'll be seeing you tomorrow. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and to like this video and to share it around if it is something that has struck a chord in you in a good way. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you on this subject. It was really, really cathartic to do so because it was such a light bulb moment. So thank you for allowing me to share this space with you. I'll be chatting to you tomorrow. Mwah! Bye!